welcome to yet another episode of the Let's Talk Leadership podcast. This is a show where I, Elly, MD of Transition Partners, and the CEO, Sandra, talk to some of the world's highest achieving business and tech leaders.
In each episode, we will be sharing tales, tips, techniques, and war stories in the hope that you will learn from some of these amazing leaders to help you develop and progress your career.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Let's Talk Leadership podcast. So today we have the fabulous Itai Aaronsohn on the show. Itai is a leader who is passionate about building teams of driven professionals. In the last 14 years of his career, he's been involved in a range of organizations in the internet and mobile industry and helped building startups and products from day one. He has lived and worked in 3 countries, moving from Israel to Switzerland and now Germany. He has recently started a new role at Aklamio as a VP of product management and is a family man and enthusiastic endurance athlete. So we're looking forward to hearing your story today. How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Hi, very good. So happy to have you on the show. Sarah said some wonderful things.
Well, thank you for having me. I'm very excited to, try to share whatever I can.
Fantastic, brilliant. What an interesting background from the quick intro that we've just had from Elly. So I'm really interested, and I'm sure our listeners are really interested in finding out a little bit more detail. Obviously, you've moved around from country to country. You've had a look at your LinkedIn profile, Elly, and you've had obviously a number of varied positions, and you've progressed very quickly by the looks of things. So it'd be great to share some of your leadership experiences, challenges, etc. But before we go into that, I always like to start with asking you, asking about the journey that you've taken to get to where you are. So if you can tell us all, how did it start for you? How did you get into kind of the tech world? And then just tell us a quick tour of how you got to where you are today.
Yeah, sure. I think every story is quite unusual, and I mean, mine is, I guess, no different to that.
That's why we made the podcast. That's what we like to hear. The more unusual, the better.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, I guess I studied law and management, and after I graduated, I did my internship and became a lawyer. And yeah, so I'm actually a certified lawyer in the state of Israel, but once I finished my internship, I got a permanent position offer for the firm where I did my internship, and then I had to, I started thinking, and I realized I'm not sure I want to do this. Actually, I'm quite sure I don't want to do this. So I took off. I flew to Sri Lanka and India for 6 months.
Wow!
Yeah, where I just traveled and took the time to think. And then I realized with this type of, general education, I could go either into, back then I identified either real estate or what was back then known as the internet. So I chose the latter. And when I came back, I started working really without any training or any idea about anything, as like a part-time project manager for a company, like a really entry-level position. And then from there, things took up quite quickly, and I came more from, the business side of things. So I started moving more and more towards business development, and then into general management. So I managed a daughter company within a bigger company, and I was completely responsible for the business side and of course for everything else, for the performance of the unit. And that got me interested into, what are we actually doing? And then I started realizing that that's what I really care about. I mean, that's the interesting part. So having done like 3 to 4 years of business development and general management, I decided to really focus only on the product side. And having left that company after almost 5 years, being started as a part-time project manager, finishing as a GM of one of the units and the senior vice president for business development. And it was not a small company. We're roughly 500 people. I just moved to a startup as one of the first employees and as head of product marketing, which was head of nothing because it was just me and one designer. But that's the way early stage startups go. And I spent a couple of years there, and then I started my own company with a partner, and in the end I sold my share. And in the middle, probably did another one or two companies. Each company was very different in terms of the vertical and the type of product it was, mostly B2C, but I also had touches to B2B, and some of them were very technical. Some of them were very, I think, technically simple, but were more about, the experience and about the customer journey. And these are things that back then were not so clear and developed as they are today. So I think we were exploring a lot and experimenting a lot and doing a lot of, it was mostly about you read whatever you could find, and there was not too many people, at least that I found, that I could talk to. So it was mostly about trial and error. And after I sold my share of the company I co-founded, I took some time off. I did my first Ironman, which is side work, but you said an introduction. So you said like endurance athlete. So that was part of what I dedicated some of the time off I took to. And then came the offer from Switzerland, and having had 2 young kids and like a young family, my daughter was 3, my son was 1. My wife and I were like, we're not sure. And we said, okay, let's jump on the adventure. Worst case, come back in a year.
How did that come about?
Well,
the offer from Switzerland, how did that come about, just out of interest?
Well, funnily enough, I saw a Facebook post by an ex-colleague of mine who was actually advising this company, and he was looking for someone to head their product, the technical product area. And I just, out of curiosity, got in touch with him. And things progressed super quickly. I never expected that. I mean, again, from my perception was that I would never have anything to offer outside of Israel. I've always, I worked a lot internationally, but I never thought I could actually move abroad and have something to offer in other markets. And for me, that was kind of I was just testing the water, but it took like 2 weeks, and they made me an offer, including relocation, including everything.
Oh, perfect.
Yeah, I was a bit shocked, and then we had to make a decision, and we decided to go for it. So it all happened very quickly. We kind of moved out with the entire family in about a month. So
wow.
I went to Zurich after a week and did my
waste any time.
They were really keen on getting started, and I'm the kind of guy, the moment I make a decision, now everything becomes an obstacle. So I need to get going. So and so we ended up being in Zurich for 2 years, and things did not work out so well there at the end. So the company failed to raise more money for different reasons. And then we had to make a quick decision again, really quick. What do we do next? Or do we go back to Israel? Do we try, somewhere in an English-speaking country, or do we stick to the fact that my kids spoke somewhat Swiss German, and by then, and we identified Berlin as the best tech hub for us, at least for me. I mean, and a city we really liked, and we've been here before, and we really liked it, and it seemed like there was a lot of the many things were happening here in terms of the tech scene, startups, and I started very quickly, like really cold calling, sending emails out, and the response was very strong from the market. So there was a lot of interest, and that's how I landed at Lamudi, which was a rocket internet company, as a chief product officer. Spent roughly 2 years there. And then I moved to Koya, which is a full stack digital insurance backed by Valar, where I spent almost 2.5 years till a few months ago. And now I joined Aklamio. And we can dive into all of this, but that's briefly the introduction.
Fantastic.
Sorry, it took too much time.
No, not at all. No, it's interesting. Great, fantastic. What a journey then. So you're all settled in Berlin now by the sounds of it. And I don't blame you. I absolutely love the city, and it's absolutely booming from a tech point of view as well. We've been operating in Berlin for about 2.5 years, I think now, haven't we? And it's there's so much going on, which is fantastic. So I think my first initial question on that note with regards to your background is what obviously you've worked for various companies, different industries at different stages, startups, like you said, you know, in one of the businesses you were the first employee, What I think, because obviously this is a leadership podcast, it'd be really interesting to understand what size along the journey, what size teams you've been responsible for, like what you've inherited and managed, but then also teams that you've grown from scratch. And then we can probably delve into your leadership experience a little bit more.
Yeah, sure. I can say that very early on, I mean, like in the first company I worked for, when I became a GM of a unit, it was very small. I mean, I would say probably between 12 to 18 people, including like a small development team, one product manager, one designer. It was like a typical early stage startup. Despite the fact we had quite a big business running underneath that, but it was very lean. Although back then we didn't use the word lean. And then, like I said, I moved to as a first employee in a startup. I was the only product person. We had like quite a robust development team, but one designer who reported to me, and that was it. I mean, literally, there was no actual management done there. It was mostly about decision making about the product. But the moment I got back into, moved to Switzerland, and then I basically had to start thinking about teams. And I have to say, I always think broader than my own team, because normally when you join a company that is a startup still, but still not fully established, normally I spread my wings around the entire organization in terms of processes and structures. In many cases, I find that this is the thing that holds back companies that I'm talking to, working with, and so on. And it's first about, establishing, who's responsible for what, how do we interact, what are the intersections, where do we meet, how do we make decisions? In many cases, it's lack of strategy that holds businesses back. So these are all the areas I look at. And I think that's part of leadership, although it's not directly managerial responsibility. Yeah. But it's definitely, I'm not only looking at my own small team, but from a team perspective, I think like Joyce, I joined, they had 2 product managers and maybe 1 designer. And I had to grow the team. I had to hire more product managers. I had to start looking into BI. I had to grow the design team and so on. Excuse me. And again, Lamudi, when I joined, again, I think 2 product managers in the beginning and a very strange organization. I had to basically shuffle the entire structure of the company. To be more business driven and therefore more product driven, and hire more people, of course. So it's always about, I think, first you have to define the areas of ownership and responsibility for people, for teams. So they know what they need to be doing, they know what they need to be focusing about. And that also helps you identify where the gaps in your team or in the entire organizations are. In many cases, I saw, I don't need more product managers, because if I only have 2 Scrum teams, it doesn't make sense to add more product managers, for example, because there's not enough firepower. I cannot deliver fast enough to justify hiring more product managers. But in that case, I may need to hire more developers, or actually the bottleneck could be QA. It could be, SRE. It could come from the business that the requirements are not coming in structured enough. So you have to improve the interface there. But I think generally the past few years I've had like between 10 and 20 direct reports. Bless you. In both product design, UX research, copywriting. So sometimes some of these areas are either in product or in marketing. And in the past couple of years, they all fell in my lap, kind of, in my team. So right now I think my team is 12 or 13 people. And that's pretty much the ballpark within an organization of roughly 100 people.
Yeah, so it would be fantastic to explore that. I'd love to find out a little bit more about your position at the moment, and also explore your leadership style and how that's developed along the journey that we've discussed.
Cool. Well, my job at Aklamio, and also has been for the past few years, was basically to lead the product organization. And that basically means that I mean, the title doesn't really matter from my perspective. I mean, I was a chief product officer in my previous 2 positions. Now I'm a VP. Before that, I was a senior VP. To me, it doesn't make any difference. What makes a difference is where you positioned in the organization. not from a hierarchy perspective, but from a structural perspective.
Yeah.
How are things working around that? And as the leader of the product organization, I see my job as always, first of all, setting strategy, of course, together with the other members of the management team. Could be C-level, could be whatever you call them, doesn't matter again. But it's always about focus of the company, because these are startups, and if we go too wide, we scratch the surface, but we never make a dent, and I always say we have to be laser focused, in order to make a tiny little hole in the wall, and then you can break the wall. But if you just scrape the surface, it doesn't work, and we have to be everybody needs to be running in the same direction, and that's in most companies I've met and worked with, that was an initial problem. So that's one of the first things you have to align is vision, mission, strategy, the things that may sound very basic, but are still missing in many organizations. And even if they exist, they're not practiced. So first set them, then live by them, use them.
I love that laser strategy.
So that's one layer there. And then it's to make sure that we are properly set, that we know what we try to achieve, and that we have the structure and the organizational processes to do that. So it is coordinating between, I always say that again, like product for me, we're like water. Our job is to occupy space between other things, and to make sure that everything runs smoothly. So it's either, you can call it glue, you can call it water, but our job is to make sure that interfaces actually work. And I that's why I'm a great believer in communication. And I really see us as a product organization, again, standing in the center and trying to bring everybody together, trying to make sure that the business requirements are clear, that the KPIs are clear, that the reporting is there, that we, our job is also to bring back meaning to the entire organization. It's very easy, and I've met it many times, that tech organizations are expected to deliver, but then no one circles back to them with the results of what happened post-development. You deployed a new feature, a new product, whatever, and then you're done. You're on to the next ticket. But in the end, that doesn't work. It works for specific people, specific types, and like I always differentiate between coders, or sometimes code monkeys, and engineers. And but that's the difference between having just people doing what you tell them, or having people who are engaged and who are actually bringing something out of themselves into what they do. And the only way to get to the latter is by sharing the meaning of the work that you've done back to you, and creating a circle there, that everybody knows, why have we done this? What happened after we did that? Did it work? Did it not work? If it didn't work, why? If it worked, how well? Why? And so you get people engaged, and then you actually leverage that to use their brains and not just their fingers to deliver value for the company.
I guess that means your whole team's like really accountable, really on board and focused on that vision, like you say. So let's talk about your leadership style then, and how that's developed along the years.
Oh wow! Well, I think there's a huge. Well, first of all, I grew up. In terms of experience and age.
You all do, unfortunately.
It's very difficult to stop that, as my white beard will tell you. But also, I think the culture has really changed. And again, I've moved out of Israel 6.5 years ago. And I've learned so much about how do you lead people, not only in terms of, it's a cultural thing, right? It's about communication, it's about sensitivity, it's about different things that happen in certain environments are not so well accepted or not so common in other environments. And I think I'll always be an Israeli, and that has pluses and minuses, like coming from anywhere around the world. But that does push me to be very direct, and to be. I always try to be also as precise as I can. So you have to be very direct with people, and you have to be honest. Like always, for me, the first rule is you don't say something when someone's not in the room if you wouldn't say it to their face. And then actually better say it to their face and not when they're not in the room.
I think it's just sometimes how you deliver that, isn't it? Which I always find a challenge.
Well, I completely agree. And I think that's part of the cultural maybe growth that I think I've earned by moving around and being exposed to people from different parts of the world is the fact that I've learned, I hope, again, you probably have to ask my team, but I can tell you that I've certainly improved on my ability to deliver these things in a way that doesn't create, it doesn't push people away and it doesn't get them to shut down. And I think, again, that's a cultural difference, because in the beginning of my career, again, I didn't think about, giving meaning for the developers. No one thought about that. For us, it was like, I was a GM, I had investors, I would sit with them, I would present what I want to do. They either said, okay, go as the board, or they would say, we're not so happy, come back again. And then I'd go back, tell the product manager, look, this is what we're going to be doing, sit down, come back with mock-ups. And then the developers would get tickets and they would work. And that was basically it. I mean, no one looked at the numbers in the entire organization except for me. And I think the fact that today I really get offended if people don't look at the numbers. And again, some companies don't even have available numbers. And that's like the foundation of when I joined. That's one of the first questions that I need to ask. Like, how are we steering this boat? How do we know if we're doing well or not? How do you know if you're doing well, and how does he or she know if they're doing well? Do they have KPIs? Are these KPIs available? Are they accessible? So these are things that I've learned along the years, and this has been my growth. But I think also the industry has become, has really progressed in that, and also the culture has changed. I also see a lot of difference in that. When I started, it was only work. You were measured by the number of hours you spent in the office. And that's also, I think, very Israeli, to come in the morning and spend 12 hours in the office and go back home at 9 p.m. and say, oh, I worked so hard. Well, actually, from a productivity perspective, you maybe worked 3 hours. The rest of the time you drank coffee, you had a very long lunch. I don't know what you do. You chatted to your colleagues, but really, like, pure work time was very, very limited. And I think back then, that was quite early on, I tried to push to my team, I don't care how long you spend in the office. We set goals. When you meet your goal, you can leave the office at 12 and go to the beach. And our office was not that far away from the beach.
Oh, lovely.
Wow.
But that was a real struggle for people. Really, back then, that was a real struggle. Because from a cultural perspective, they were used to being measured based on, am I here when my boss leaves? When the CEO leaves, am I still there? Will he, when he walks down the hall, and he looks into the open space or into my office, am I still there? And like, this was, I think, like, for me, that was one big light bulb back then, that, it doesn't matter for this business, like, how many hours you spend there. It's about delivery. And now it sounds trivial again nowadays, but back then for me, that was like a big discovery.
It's a whole culture change, isn't it? There's a lot of synergy, I think, what you've mentioned here, between what we interviewed a guy probably about 3 months ago, wasn't it, Martin Sabag, and he was a VP of product in Tel Aviv, and it was really similar, really similar discussion to what you just said. So really interesting.
I think what would be really interesting to move on to next is obviously you've had a very varied background. You've worked in a number of different businesses, industries, different sizes. I'm sure it's not been smooth running the whole time.
Unfortunately.
Unfortunately.
We wish.
I mean, that would just be the perfect world, wasn't it? I'm sure you've had some sleepless nights and some very stressful situations. It'd be really interesting to find out maybe about one of your like a big project failure or a business failure, and how what happened, what you learned from it, the whole kind of experience around the situation, and then what you would have done differently in hindsight.
Sure. Well, I can give you the biggest one I think I have, which is the company I co-founded. And despite the fact I somehow sold my share, for me, that's a huge failure. I think I founded this company together with a partner. He came to me with the idea.
What was the industry?
The industry was, we actually built, back then, it was a user-generated content app for step-by-step recipes on tablets. Okay. But the idea was basically to have a cooking companion in the kitchen that stands next to you and delivers recipes that are meant to be consumed on an iPad or on a tablet. So they're very visual and they're built step by step.
It's a really good idea.
I still think it's quite a good idea.
I'd use it.
Yeah, I think since then there are a couple of apps that actually do similar things, but we started with the idea that you can also create the content on the tablet by yourself, which was highly unusual. That you can create recipes. Yeah, you can take pictures with the iPad. You can do everything there.
Yeah.
And I think
I'm sure I'd be taking pictures of my food. But
well, that was actually one of the problems, I think, in getting this to work, was the fact that, this is a highly visual thing, right? So from a product perspective, people don't want to look at your scrambled eggs, right? They want to see something which is really good looking.
It's like that. Do you know Rate My Plate, where people take pictures of their dinner, and most of the time people are really proud of this dinner and it looks horrendous, and then people absolutely slate their dinner. It's really funny.
That sounds like fun, actually.
Yeah, it's good.
But I think in a way we saw it as something maybe a bit similar to what Airbnb had gone through in early stages, right? So they started with user-generated content. Like, people took pictures of their own apartments, but when you looked at the pictures people took, said, I don't want to stay in this shithole. Sorry.
Yeah.
But then they realized, okay, we should send photographers to these people's apartments if they agree that they will rent them out, I don't know how many days per year, so they look nice. And I think that's one of the big changers that they managed to do to become very successful. And so I think our problem, the reason for the failure was, first, we were both product people. So as two founders with different backgrounds, different ideas, different perspectives, we were both product people, and that was not easy. And we were both not fully committed, to be honest. We were kind of cruising through this experience, and we never really put everything into it, I have to say. We used our own money to fund this thing, and we paid to develop it. And we ended up with, I think we had like 12,000 users on iPads without investing in marketing, which was not bad.
Yeah, that's good.
Yeah, but at this point, it came to the fact that we just couldn't agree anymore. And we had, and I just sold my share to the partner and moved on. But again, it was very disappointing.
Did you do it alongside your full-time permanent job as well, or did you do it as a full project and breakaway? Because you said you were kind of like not fully engaged in the product itself or the business. Was it something you were doing part-time then?
Well, it started part-time, but very quickly I quit my job back then. And I did it in parallel. Actually, on my side, it was parallel to preparing for the Ironman, which I think was not a good idea. I was very consumed by training. I was very focused on training. And also, I think the point was that none of us was really fully engaged and was driving this very strongly forward. If one of us would have been fully committed, he had his own reason for not being fully in there, and we were kind of cruising, and I think it just blew up in our faces in the end.
It's a lot. It takes a lot of energy and time and commitment, doesn't it, to start business and then grow it and keep it running, I guess, successfully. It's and like you say, I think your mindset and the commitment's got to be there, otherwise it's
a big common theme, isn't it, when we speak about startups, is like you might have the best idea in the world, but if it's not the right timing for you personally or your business partners, then the best idea in the world can even not take off, right?
So many things have to align to make this magic happen, and that's what I've seen even in companies that have been funded quite heavily, could have raised 20, 40, 50 million. That doesn't guarantee anything, because still so many things have to align for this to really become a unicorn or become really hugely successful. It's a very, very tricky thing, and that's the kind of the little balance point that you have to strike there, which is, it's very, very fine, and it's very difficult to find.
Definitely.
Fantastic. So it'd be interesting to hear more about what keeps you sane and healthy, and obviously Obviously, we know that you've taken part in the Ironman contest, and I should imagine that's been a big player during the years. But it'd be good to share with everyone any other kind of like insights you have around just general health and well-being. And obviously you've been in some very stressful roles and situations. You know, I should imagine even moving, you know, up sticks and moving quickly twice has been difficult and challenging as well. Yeah, over to you.
Well, first, of course, I always default back to sports. I mean, I think sports is good for your body, it's good for your mind, it's good. The endorphins are good for your mood. It's just good for you. However, I think over the years, I've also learned that I have to find a way to balance between work and family. I mean, when I started my career, I had no family, I was single. And then I was really fully devoted to work. So it was basically, I'd run to the office in the morning and then just stay there 12, 14 hours, whatever it took. And then either run back or like catch a ride with someone. And that was basically my life. So having to learning over the years how to, you know, not only invest the best that I have at work, but also have some of it left to spend at home. It's been a struggle for me. It hasn't been very easy, and it has taken me some time. But I think now my kids are a bit older; they're 9 and 7. But I really get a kick out of spending time with them, and that really helps me. I mean, especially now when we're at home, the fact that I can just now open the door and play Scrabble or you know, do something with them, that's awesome. And I think that makes it so much easier. And I think especially in these crazy times of Corona, everybody's locked at home. I'm mostly worried about my team members who are single, who live alone, who spend their entire day at home alone in front of the screen. And it's our job, I think, as leaders and as organizations to take care of them. And to try to do the best that we can to support them, because I think it's not a full lockdown here again or yet in Berlin, but still the days are getting shorter, the weather is getting gloomier, winter is coming, and that definitely has an effect on people's moods. And it's our job, as you know, to take care of that and to try to support people with some, you know, real solutions that help them get through the day and stay happy and healthy. And I think it's mostly about trying to find areas of interest that are common for people. So I always try, whenever I join a company, I try to start like a running group or a cycling group. Normally that doesn't work because then people tell me, no, you're too fast, whatever, it doesn't matter. And it doesn't mean that I'm fast, I'm very slow, but it's just the image that people get. But I still try. And I'll always try, you know, when I was in university, I was a bartender for many years, and I always try to, you know, have teach people how to make cocktails night at work and this type of stuff. So now we're going to do it remotely, actually, for Aklamio. So I'll do it from home, and we will do it over Zoom. But yeah, but these types of things. So try to find like people to speak about music, to speak about hiking, whatever, and then just. Normally you do it by the coffee machine. Now there's no coffee machine. Everybody makes coffee at home. So, you know, next move is to open like an open Slack channel where you say, I'm going on a coffee break, and have a permanently open hangout where you would go as if you were next to the coffee machine and chat to people then about whatever, like dogs. I'm also big on dogs. I have a dog. We have dogs in the office. The dog goes to the office with me. We miss our dog friends in the office. Yeah. So it's just about creating another layer on top of work, like the human that reminds us that we're people.
It's so important, isn't it? And it's been so tough for everyone the past year. So I think having that opportunity to get on a human level with your team is really, really important. So I'd love to finish the podcast then with finding out what's on your agenda, what you've got planned over the next sort of 12 months that you're really excited about. And that can be personal and professional.
Well, I wish I could have started personal, but Corona has basically, I have no plans. I mean, my first plan when I can is to go back home to Israel to visit my family, which I really dearly miss. We haven't seen them in a year. And this has been the longest break for me and the kids, not seeing my parents.
How often do you usually fly back?
Well, usually we chose Berlin because it's so close to Israel. So that was part of the reason we decided to stay here and not move to the valley. And normally, I mean, we have a guest bedroom. So normally we would have one of the sides of the grandparents, or we would fly to Israel every other month, sometimes even once a month. So we fly to Israel normally, the kids 3 times a year, 2 to 3 times, and my parents come here 3 times, and my wife's parents come here 3 times, and some of our siblings come to visit with their families. So it's kind of, we have at least 1 week a month normally that that we have guests here, or that we are away. And it's been a year that we have had no one, and it's quite difficult. So that would be like the first thing I'll be super excited about. And work-wise, wow, I have so much to do. I mean, I really want to take Aklamio to the next level, and I think we have what it takes. The business is so successful as it is, and it has so much potential. I think right now we're talking about how to become more efficient internally, and how to align, again, the entire company. Like I feel like the shepherd dog running around, making sure the sheep don't scatter. It's like getting everybody to run in the same direction, knowing where we want to get. I think that's where I am right now. I just started. It's been 2 months, but we are on a very good track there. I'm super happy with the way things are progressing now. And I believe we can, my goal for next year would be to turn Aklamio into a, well, I wouldn't say unicorn in 1 year, because that's not going to happen, but realistically be on the path to be at least a worldwide leader in incentivization of users by brands.
Fantastic.
That's great. Brilliant. And there'll be growth plans as part of that, so you'll be expanding on your current team?
Well, of course. I mean, I've just finished now my recruitment plan for 2021. So I already know where I'm going. And yeah, the team will probably at least double over the course of next year. And when I say team, for me, it's the entire tech organization. It's not only product design. And I look at this holistically. So we have to at least double. And that's without fundraising. So if we fundraise, we probably have to speed that and
exciting.
Also,
and I really felt that fire and passion for you about the business then. So that's so exciting. Brilliant. So if anyone's got any questions or wants to get in touch about your journey, or you might get some fellow friends that want to join this running club in Berlin, is the best way to get in touch on LinkedIn? What's the best?
Yeah, I'm open on LinkedIn always, and I always try to reply to everybody. So I'm always happy to hear from people.
Awesome.
Fantastic.
It's been a pleasure having you on the show. Thank you so much for sharing your story.
Thank you very much for having me. It's a pleasure.
Take care. Bye-bye.
We would like to thank all of our listeners for tuning in. It means a lot to us, and we really appreciate your support.